Hello and welcome. I'm Suma Katauka and you're watching the World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at the top headlines of this hour. US President Donald Trump has said that the United States needs Greenland for national security and to strengthen NATO's effectiveness without it. Russia or China could gain control and anything less than US ownership is unacceptable. Independent human rights groups have stated that the death toll from the crackdown on protests in Iran has crossed more than 2,000 people. A senior Iranian official has warned the US against military action, saying Iran would strike American bases if attacked. Tehran has reportedly asked its regional leaders, including Turkey, to prevent any military escalation by the United States. US President Donald Trump has now stated that a US takeover will be great for Venezuela as American oil companies formulate their re-entry strategy into Venezuelan oil market. According to official government statement, Algeria's President Abdelmajid Tebboune has called on youth living abroad in vulnerable or illegal situations to return home, promising to regularize their status and grant amnesty for minor offenses. The call is to the 54,000 Algerians who left for Europe between 2020 and 2024. According to French official statements, France's Interior Ministry has banned 10 British far-right activists from entering or remaining in France after determining their actions could incite violence and seriously disrupt public order. Trump says day of reckoning and retribution is coming to Minnesota, where 37-year-old Renee Nicole Good was killed by an ICE agent as protests continue in Minneapolis. Apple signs multi-year deal with Google to fix Siri with Gemini, which the company promised at WWDC 2024 but has since been delayed. Apple had promised 3 big upgrades to Siri to take it on par with rivals like Gemini and ChatGPT. Now we start with US. According to reports, Washington has ordered some personnel to depart major American bases in the Middle East, including in Udeid in Qatar. The move is described as a precaution as tensions rise following Iran's protest crackdown and US warnings of possible action ahead. Furthermore, Qatar has announced it is taking all necessary measures to ensure the security and safety of its citizens and residents amid growing regional tensions. The government said recent movements of personnel at the Al Udeid Air Base are part of these precautionary measures, stressing that the actions are responsive to the current situation in the region. Meanwhile, British Prime Minister Keir Starmer has condemned the murder of an anti-government protesters in Iran. Let's listen in.
Mr. Speaker, can I start by condemning, in the strongest possible terms, the sickening repression and murder of protesters in Iran? The contrast between the courage of the Iranian people and the brutality of their desperate regime has never been clearer. Mr. Speaker, we've called out this brutality face to face. We're working with allies on further sanctions and doing all we can to protect UK nationals.
Rights group HRANA has verified 2,403 protester deaths and 147 government-related fatalities. This comes as Tehran has warned neighbors hosting US troops that it would strike if America intervenes. Now for this discussion, we welcome Mr. Yossi Cooper-Wasser. He's an Israeli intelligence and security expert, joins us live from Tel Aviv. Thank you very much, Mr. Cooper-Wasser, for joining us again. Good to see you. Now,
thank you for having me.
Thank you. Now, looking at this Iran and U.S. situation, what can U.S. do? And now that U.S. has said that diplomacy, or kind of closed the door of diplomacy, and what do you think could come next, as U.S. also has removed some personnel from their bases around Middle East?
Well, I think the U.S. understands that only very severe measures on its behalf are going to deter the Iranian regime from killing the demonstrators. And once they stop doing that, they are going to be facing the wrath of those demonstrators who want to see a change in regime in Iran. So we are now in a duel, I would say, between Khamenei on the one side and President Trump on the other, about the fate of the demonstrations and the fate of the Iranian regime as well. And that's what they can do. There's a wide variety of steps that they can take, not necessarily kinetic, but also kinetic steps, in order to make sure that those in the government of Iran that are responsible for killing the demonstrators will pay a price for that.
And now that we know that there's not, even a lot of people in Iran are not happy, but they keep the regime keeps pointing fingers outside instead of admitting to their mistakes or their wrongdoings. What's your take on that, as they continue to, say that it's because of U.S. or it's because of Israeli agents, etc.?
Well, this is ridiculous. Nobody believes that. It's, the grievances of the Iranian people are real and not invented by any foreign force. There's a lack of water, there's a lack of electricity in a country that has so much oil under its soil, and there's malfunctioning of the entire systems in Iran because of the shortcomings of the government. And on top of that, there are also some problems that emerge from steps taken against Iran by the international community, the sanctions of the Americans and the Europeans that are taken because the Iranians insist on supporting terrorism all over the Middle East and beyond, and because they insist on having a military nuclear project. Well, the entire world wants them to stop that. So it's all the making of the Iranian Islamic regime, and nobody believes anything else but this. And I think that what the public wants to see is a change in policy, and not buy all kinds of stories about foreign intervention.
And yes, like the public, even though we are seeing a lot of visuals and public wants change, but is there anyone who can take place if this regime falls? Who's the opposition here?
Well, that's a very good question.
Thank you.
The one name that is repeatedly raised is the name of the former Shah son, Reza Pahlavi. But there's a question mark of whether he's strong enough in order to do that. But I think that this revolution is going to give birth to new names, and we'll see who's going to eventually lead this revolution. Maybe some coalition of the opposition forces, and that will together pave the road for democratic and free Iran, that would allow the people of Iran to decide who's going to take care of the fate of Iran in the future.
Yes, that's a good point. We will be eyeing that. And also, as we know, the voters, of course, are not in Iran of President Trump. They're all in U.S. But U.S. President Trump keeps posting in his Truth Social about Iran, and he also keeps making statements about these protesters. But of course, at the end of the day, these people are not the people voting for Trump in the upcoming midterm elections, right? So what is Trump's motive? What do you think?
Well, I think, first of all, he has this sense of solidarity with the people that are being murdered in Iran, and he knows that they are fighting for freedom, and he feels for them. And on top of that, Iran is a threat and a source of terrorism, a threat for stability, and the source of terrorism all over the world. And they shout repeatedly death to America, and he doesn't like it. And he understands that steps should be taken in order to prevent them from being able to make good on their promise to kill America. And of course, because they also cooperate with China and Russia, it is another good reason for him to take action against this regime. But I think basically it's because he cannot stand this pictures coming out of Iran of demonstrators being murdered by their own regime. It's something that nobody should tolerate. And we see even some Europeans are speaking against it, and that's clear that anybody in the free world cannot accept this kind of situation.
Right. Thank you very much, Mr. Cooper-Wasser, for sharing that. Please stay with us as we come back to you for our next discussion as well. Now, moving the focus on to China, Chinese authorities have told domestic companies to stop using cybersecurity software made by roughly a dozen firms from the US and Israel due to national security concerns. As trade and diplomatic tensions flare between China and the US, and both sides vie for tech supremacy, and Beijing has been keen to replace Western-made technology with domestic alternatives. According to sources, the US companies whose cybersecurity software has been banned include Broadcom-owned VMware, Palo Alto Networks, and Fortinet, while the Israeli companies include Checkpoint Software Technologies. Now, for this discussion, we welcome back Mr. Cooper-Wasser. He's an Israeli intelligence and security expert from Tel Aviv. Thank you very much, Mr. Cooper-Wasser, for staying with us. Now, looking at this, this ban, why do you think China is countering right now? What does this timing suggest? And also, how will this affect Israeli companies? As long as I know that Tel Aviv is a big hub for a lot of tech companies and many cutting-edge tech companies.
Yes, but that is true. Israel is a major hub of high tech and especially of cybersecurity. I think we are third or second in the world in the volume of our business in this area. But I don't think we do a lot of business with China because of security reasons. And so I'm not sure this is going to be such a big damage to Israeli companies. I think basically it stems from the need of the Chinese to retaliate to steps taken against their companies, their high-tech companies in the West in general. And that's why they take this step. Maybe they're also really worried that this may lead to their secrets leaked to some other places. But basically, I don't think this is the main reason. The main reason is the will to retaliate to steps taken against their companies around the globe.
Right. With that, I would like to thank Mr. Yossi Cooper-Wasser for joining us today and sharing that insight throughout our news. Now we have a breaking news. A Greenland government has announced an increased military presence in and around the island, emphasizing that the move is aimed at strengthening NATO's footprint in the Arctic and enhancing European and transatlantic security. Officials said the purpose of the deployments and ongoing exercises is to train forces to operate under the unique Arctic conditions while ensuring readiness in a strategically important region. The Danish armed forces, in close cooperation with NATO allies, will continue their Arctic exercises, highlighting the collaborative defense posture. Greenland's government has stressed that the measures are defensive and part of broader efforts to maintain stability in the Arctic, a region of growing geopolitical significance due to its natural sources and strategic shipping routes. Now, for this breaking news, we welcome Ms. Alison Mutler. She's a former AP Bureau Chief in Romania, joins us live from Bucharest. Thank you very much, Ms. Alison, for joining us once again. Good to see you. Now that tensions and, of course, the situation is escalating, how do you analyze this current readiness or countermeasures by the NATO with minus US and, of course, the Greenland in Greenland by the towards defense for themselves versus US? Yes.
Well, I think the world, America included, was quite surprised by Donald Trump's statements. They weren't totally unexpected, but he was very forceful in saying the US needed Greenland for security. It wasn't even a question of discussion or negotiations. And I think Europe was alarmed at first. You could see by the statements made by the Danish Prime Minister and other leading officials in Europe. And now I think that Denmark and NATO, minus the US, as your report said, want to take back control, not of Greenland, but of this story, of this narrative that this is a strategic island and it's important for NATO defense. So what they are doing by staging these exercises, which they underline are defensive, is showing they are being responsible for the security situation, and they're taking it seriously. So Donald Trump can't say, this island is undefended, we need it, we're going to take it. So they're trying to behave responsibly, but also constructively by holding these defensive exercises. Obviously, they've been staged in a very short time. Normally, exercises like this, there's weeks or if not months in the planning. But we are living in unprecedented times, and the statements by Donald Trump have caused alarm both sides of the Atlantic, particularly in Europe. So these exercises is both a political statement that NATO members, especially led by Denmark, are taking control of the territory. They are showing that they are concerned about security and its strategic position. And it's a kind of riposte to Donald Trump to show him that, yes, we're in control here. We have everything under control. And, there is no need for any outside intervention.
Do you think they will be able to continue this stance? Do you think they will be able to balance this out?
That's a good question.
Thank you.
It very much depends on what Donald Trump's aims are and the aims of his administration. If he really does want to wants more control over Greenland, then we can expect more statements, and eventually there will be negotiations and discussions. Because I really don't think the US is going to intervene militarily in Greenland. I think that would be rather a haphazard thing to do, and it would not particularly benefit Donald Trump or Greenland or Denmark or NATO. But I think now the ball is in Donald Trump's court. How will he respond to these exercises? How will he say, I think he said yesterday, I'm going to take Greenland one way or the other. We have to see where his rhetoric goes. And we know from the past that sometimes what Donald Trump says doesn't necessarily come true. But then sometimes, in the case of Venezuela, he didn't make too many announcements, and then there was that spectacular, from a tactical point of view anyway, capture of Nicolas Maduro. So now the ball is in Donald Trump's court, and we have to see how serious he is about getting control of Greenland. That's the thing we'll be waiting for next.
So what do you think, it's very ironic, yes, like you rightfully mentioned that he was very quiet about Venezuela and then a big move. And then so many other things, he's very loud and then no action. So do you think a lot of countries are now taking his statements about Greenland, they're taking it so serious because what happened on the 3rd January towards Nicolas Maduro?
Absolutely. I think it's the fact that his statements on Greenland came so shortly after the capture of Nicolas Maduro, that US military intervention, that the countries were forced to take this seriously. And it's not the first time Donald Trump has mentioned his strategic interest in Greenland. He mentioned it in his first term and before. But the fact that it came after this spectacular operation in Venezuela, that they were forced to take it seriously. And he didn't just say it once, he kept repeating it in various different ways. We're going to get it. He was saying that the Russians and the Chinese were in submarines around the island. I don't think that's necessarily true, but it's possible they have interest in that area. They'd be silly not to. But I think NATO allies were forced to take this seriously, particularly Denmark, because it directly affects the country over which they have, I think, foreign and security policy. They are in charge of Greenland. So yes, of course, they had to take it seriously. But again, with Donald Trump, you never know. You have to see how it plays out, what his plans are.
With that, I would like to thank Ms. Alison Mutler for joining us today and sharing that insight on this breaking news. Now we move on to US and Venezuela. House Foreign Affairs Committee Democrats are holding a special public meeting today after Republicans failed to conduct any hearings on the Trump administration's actions in Venezuela and the Caribbean. Ranking Member Gregory Meeks extended an invitation to U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, who declined to testify before Congress. Instead, Democrats will hear from former diplomats and foreign policy experts. This comes as the Trump administration argues it cannot comply with the federal judge's order to provide court hearings for dozens of deported Venezuelan migrants. Officials say the removals cannot be reviewed after U.S. forces deposed Nicolas Maduro earlier this month. Now for this discussion, we welcome back Ms. Alison Mutler. She's a former AP Bureau Chief in Romania, joins us live from Bucharest. Thank you very much, Ms. Mutler, for staying with us. Now, looking at this, so many things coming in from U.S., what more can you tell us about this ongoing, federal versus Trump administration situation?
Well, there's a real showdown at the moment between the federal and the state jurisdiction, and also with Congress, because when Donald Trump acted in Venezuela, he is the chief of the armed forces. He does have the right, but he bypassed Congress. And that obviously caused concern with Congress, because this is not the way that the U.S. has conducted its military affairs, its foreign affairs in recent history. But he had the right to do that. But it has caused questions and concern, and Congress would like there to be some, liability. They'd like there to be some explanation about this. And talking about him going over the heads of other institutions, we saw of course, in the tragic shooting of a woman Minneapolis in Minnesota, that the ICE agents were there, and they were conducting on the ground, and they surpassed the local law enforcement. So again, Donald Trump is taking his power, and he is bypassing the traditional route. He is ignoring, if you like, the Congress. And also the state authorities. He says this is for security reasons, and he has a point in Venezuela that had he let members of Congress know about his planned intervention, it probably would have been leaked to the press. And with that kind of intervention, you can't afford that. But he is making this a modus operandi in which he is going over the heads of the traditional hierarchy of power in the United States.
Right. And so where does this take us to? Like you mentioned, he's skipping all the traditional routes, not just domestic, but of course international law as well, and security forces. If this federal court doesn't get to hear directly from Trump administration and only from formal diplomats or formal ministers, what will be the trajectory then? Is this actually legitimate if they cannot actually hear from anyone from Trump administration?
Well, it raises very, very serious questions. I mean, what right does he, under the Constitution, under American law, have to bypass these rules, to skip, as you said, the traditional routes? Yes, there are a lot of questions being raised, and as you said, everything is happening so fast. We have one event after the other. We haven't even mentioned here Iran. We haven't particularly mentioned NATO. I mean, and Russia and Ukraine. I mean, there's just so many domestic and also international events going on. It's hard to keep up. But what we're piecing together is a certain modus operandi in which the US president seems to have unprecedented powers, and he thinks he's unassailable. Now, whether he will be held to account depends on also the American institutions, the American courts. We mustn't forget, very important this week is it's a ruling, I think, on the tariffs, whether they're legal or not. I think that's been delayed once already, but that will be very important. How strong is the court system? So it's not just what Trump wants to do, the way he operates, but it's also how the American institutions respond to his actions.
And lastly, Ms. Mutler, it seems like, instead of doing something to gain votes for his upcoming midterm election, it seems like he's just doing the opposite from my perspective. What's your take? Do you think there could be anything that can save him from losing more votes here?
Well, I mean, his voter base, he has a hardcore voter base that will vote for him whatever happens, whatever he does. So he's assured of that. But then there are, of course, the voters that are swing voters that vote depending on the results, the outcomes of his administration. And yes, we have, they say 1 week is a long time in politics. We have several months. I think it's in the fall, the midterm elections are going to be held. But yes, I think he himself realizes he could face a problem because of his, let's just say, unorthodox way of being the president of the United States. He could face quite serious problems, or his Republican Party could face quite serious problems. But he did say at one point, you better vote for me because otherwise they'll impeach me. He will put that, and if they impeach me, the situation will be worse. So he will use scare tactics, I'm sure. But yes, I think there are concerns, but he strikes me as a president who's in a great hurry to achieve his aims, and in a very unorthodox way. And we'll just have to see what the responses are, and also what the outcome of his actions are around the globe. I mean, he said he's in charge of Venezuela, and the American oil companies are going to make a lot of money. Now, that sounds quite nice, particularly the oil companies going to make a lot of money, particularly from a regime such as the Maduro regime, which flouted so many human rights. But on paper, these things, they may sound promising, shall we say, but in reality, they're much harder to achieve. And I think, he has the emotional touch with his voters, because he says words, he says he has grand gestures that appeal to some people. But you have to see at the end of the day, what is the reality? And that is what will cost him, I think. But as again, I say it's a long way before the midterm elections, but he's not behaving in a way that he looks like he's trying to get re-elected. Sorry, his party will still have a majority in Congress, but with Donald Trump, you never know. You never know what he'll come up with next.
Yeah, 100%. Very interesting. Thank you very much, Ms. Alison Butler, for joining us today and staying with us and sharing that insight with us on NewsX World. Now we move on to our next news. President Donald Trump has announced early today that his administration will end federal funding to sanctuary cities and states, calling the jurisdiction corrupt criminal protection centers that breed crime and violence. The move, effective on February 1st, comes after Trump repeatedly criticized sanctuary policies for limiting local cooperation with federal immigration authorities and providing social benefits to undocumented immigrants. The president has reiterated his stance on Truth Social post, and during a speech at the Detroit Economic Club, Attorney General Pam Bondi was directed to identify federal grants and contracts that could be suspended or terminated, with Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem involved in enforcing the order. The administration has previously listed over 500 sanctuary jurisdictions it says are obstructing immigration enforcement. The announcement follows legal challenges. A federal judge blocked an earlier executive order pausing funding for more than 30 sanctuary cities, calling it likely unconstitutional. Despite the ruling, Trump's administration has continued its crackdown on illegal immigration, which has sparked protests nationwide, including over recent ICE and Border Patrol shootings in Minneapolis and Portland. Now for this discussion, we welcome Mr. Peter Cardillo. He's a chief economist at Spartan Capitals, joins us live from New York. Thank you very much, Mr. Cardillo, for joining us. Good to see you. Now, how significant is this policy that will be, put into place from February 1st, and how will people be affected in U.S.?
Well, it's to begin with, it's significant, but this is nothing new. President Trump has a very strong feeling about illegal immigration, and he's made his thoughts known, not only in this administration, but in the previous administration. And the fact that he says he's going to cut fundings for sanctuary cities and states that follow that doctrine, is nothing new. He probably will, but of course, there'll be challenges probably in the courts, and we've seen this all along with many other situations. So At one point, I think the thought of what may or may not happen at the midterms might probably lessen his rhetoric in terms of cutting off funding. Now, that doesn't mean he's not going to do it. He probably will, but will it be long-lasting? I'm not sure. This time around, he does have a cabinet that's extremely loyal to him. So it's somewhat more meaningful from that perspective. But remember that at the end, he has to deal with voters.
Yes, and talking about voters, I asked earlier our guest as well, but so how is he planning to gain back the voters? Because he's doing so many things to deter these voters who wanted best for themselves, and it turns out like this. Yeah.
Well, he himself doesn't have to gain back the voters because this is his last term in office. And so the problem is what will happen in the midterms. And you know that Congress has the Republicans have a very, very slim lead, and even in the Senate. So if he runs the risk of losing Congress, and then he just basically has his hand ties for the next 3 years.
And lastly, so where is this all money going as he takes this money out from this kind of funding and many more fundings?
I'm sure he finds a home for it.
Yes.
I don't know where it's going, but I'm sure
Could
that
it be army?
if he takes it from column A and he puts
Yep.
it in column B and then back to B to A, I don't know, but I can tell you that I don't think that this type of action will not be challenged by the courts.
Right. Do you think that this funding could be put into military?
Well, yeah, the funding, of course, I mean, again, I don't know how, I'm not an expert on that type of politics or that type of finances, but it's just a question of, well, either you play ball with me or you're not going to get the funding that's necessary. And his administration, has been, and this is nothing new. I mean, he's been very open about this. In the previous administration, now he said, look, we don't want illegal immigrants here. And this time, obviously, he's taking much, much more harsh movements against illegal immigrants as opposed to his previous administration. And that goes back to the fact that he has a very loyal cabinet.
Right. With that, I would like to thank Mr. Peter Cardillo for joining us and sharing that insight with us on NewsX World. Now we move on to Europe. Ukraine's parliament has named Mikhailo Fedorov, who is aged 34, as the country's new defense minister. As the conflict with Russia nears its 4th year, Fedorov, previously first deputy prime minister and digital transformation minister, has been a central figure in Ukraine's high-tech war effort. He has played a key role in deploying Starlink internet terminals to frontline troops and in creating a drone line to target Russian forces. As Defense Minister Fedorov said, he plans to modernize the military through digitalization, expanded use of drones and artificial intelligence, and broader integration of technology into defense operations. That's all we have time for. Keep watching NewsX World for more news updates from around the world.